Go.
Okay. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Denise.
Welcome
Good
to
afternoon.
welcome to the Cricket Show. We are coming to you today from our studios via the web at www.blogtalkradio.com/The Cricket Show. I am joined this afternoon in our studios by Mr. Leon Francis, President of the Cricket Show. We also have Cricket Hall of Fame coach Mr. Jatin Patel with us. And our guest on this show is Mr. Roderick Lyall. Rod is a regular contributor to emergingcricket.com. He was born in Australia. He has been an ardent cricket fan since the age of 9 years. Rod is an academic who has held teaching positions at universities in New Zealand and Scotland. In 1994, Rod moved to Amsterdam, where he became heavily involved in Dutch cricket as a scorer, journalist, and an administrator. After many years of service in various administrative roles, Rod has returned to journalism, and he has not been shy to express his views and insights when it comes to cricket. Today, Rod is here to discuss with us one of his most recent essays from July in 2022. The essay title is the end nigh for cricket as we know it? Rod, once again, I say welcome to the show. And if you wish to say a quick hello before we start the interrogation, that would be fine with us.
Thank you, Dennis. Hello, listeners, and it's great to be back with you again. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Is the end nigh for cricket as we knew it? July 21, 22, first published, as I could tell, in Emerging Cricket. Rod, you wrote that a spectre is haunting global cricket. That's a very, dare I say it, very bold statement. Can you identify for us what this spectre is and how we can avoid it?
I think it's easier to identify it than to say how we can avoid it. I think it's clear, and it's, if anything, become more clear since July last year, that the rapid growth and expansion of franchise cricket, spearheaded, of course, by the IPL, does represent a threat to traditional international cricket based on matches of whatever format between national sides, which, of course, is where global cricket really starting, let us remember, in 1844 with a match between the United States and Canada, not, in fact, in 1877 in a match between England and Australia. So it's kind of appropriate to be having this conversation here. It seems to me that the demand for franchise cricket and the commercial corporatist basis which franchise cricket has does pose a threat, which the ICC, unfortunately, appears to be totally incapable of dealing with, and that it is conceivable. I don't say it's inevitable, but that it is conceivable that with players increasingly committed to the big money of franchise cricket in India, but also in the Caribbean, maybe ultimately in America, certainly in the BBL in Australia, in the franchise leagues which have sprung up over the last decade or so around the world, that as the best players follow the money, and you can't blame them for that, that the windows in which international cricket between national sides can be played will become smaller and smaller, and that either international cricket of that traditional kind will get squeezed out altogether, or it will be played between teams which do not include the very best players. And I said in the article that there was a parallel in the Davis Cup in tennis, where very often the Americans and the Australians and others have to put out national teams in the Davis Cup. Of course, they're much smaller teams, but they have to put out teams which do not include the big names of international tennis because they're too busy making money on the circuit. So I think that is foreseeable. And I think also that it has been foreseeable for at least 12 years. I recently came across an interview that I.S. Bindra, who was a very prominent figure has been a very prominent figure in the BCCI, the Indian board, an interview which he did in March 2005, in which he said that with the audiences in India, a franchise-based league could reach the level of European soccer. It can be bigger, he said, than international cricket. So we can't say we weren't warned. I think it was already clear, even before the IPL was launched, that that was the direction in which Indian cricket was considering going. And I think the ICC basically took their eye off the ball, and that partly because of the power of the BCCI within the ICC, they have been unable to deal with the problem. So I think that's where we are. Where we go from here is a different question, but I do think that's where we are.
All right. So you acknowledged in your article that the IPL is successful, and this success is driven by an insatiable appetite. My question to you is this: as a business venture, does the IPL as a corporation have the right to dictate to cricket what its terms and conditions are in order to maximize its profits like any other business venture? So let me just paraphrase that again. As a business, you want the best for your business. The IPL is a business, so it stands to reason that the IPL would want to set the terms and conditions that would enable it to maximize its profit. So that is my question to you. Do they not have that right to do that?
Yes, I think undoubtedly they do have the right, in the sense that, as you say correctly, I think any business wants to maximize its profits. The answer, the other question, though, is that is that in the long-term interest of world cricket? And my view is that the answer to that is just as clearly no. I also said in the article that the franchise leagues are parasites. And the reason I say that is because the players that they are able to sign have not come through the franchise development system, because there is no franchise development system. They have been created, they have been turned into the great cricketers that many of them undoubtedly are by the development programs of the national boards and of the constituents of the national boards. So a player, for example, a player who emerges in Australia has been created as a great player, partly, of course, from his or her own great talent, but also through the academy systems at state or at national level. So large amounts of money go into the creation of these global stars, and then they are poached, signed, choose a word as neutral or as loaded as you want. They in any case go to franchise teams, often franchise teams in several different countries around the globe through the course of the year, using the talents which they have, the skills which they have been able to develop through the efforts of coaches and academies at national level, which are often short of money. So yes, of course, the franchises and the IPL and the other franchise leagues have a right to pursue their commercial interests. But I would argue that the national boards and the ICC have not only a right, but an obligation to consider the good of cricket as a whole in the longer term, and that therefore they have to argue for, they should be arguing more strongly than they are, for a cricket economy which ensures the continued supply of excellent cricketers, and which also ensures that international cricket and domestic cricket in the ICC member countries continue to flourish, because that's the seedbed from which these tall trees grow.
Rod, many, if not all, commercial businesses employs and rely extensively on schools, colleges and universities, and of course trade organizations to train and develop their workers at no cost to the commercial business. You have excoriated the franchise leagues for not developing their cricket playing employees, because that's what they become once they sign a contract. Are the franchise league not operating just like any other commercial business? So why should they be seen as being parasitic, in your words?
It's not true that commercial concerns in other areas do not contribute to the schools and universities which produce the raw material for their staff. They do so, well, they should do so. I admit that many of them manage not to, but they should do so through taxation systems. And if I'm a multinational based in country X, I should be paying tax in that country, and perhaps in all the countries in which I operate, in order to contribute to the social costs of that society, including its education system. Part of the problem that we have globally is that international corporations have become extremely successful at tax avoidance, if not tax evasion. And there are whole islands in the Caribbean whose economies are, and not only in the Caribbean, whose economies are very substantially based in offering tax haven status to multinationals. Indeed, the ICC, of course, is itself operating out of a tax haven in the UAE. But I would say that the same general principle applies, that global corporations, any corporation, does have an obligation to pay its taxes to the system in order to be able to draw on the raw material of human labor, which it needs in order to be able to operate. And I think the current system of cricket has evolved in such a way that the corporations, which are the cricket franchises, are able to escape that obligation. And I would like to see the ICC arguing much more strongly, and indeed coming up with a system which ensures that they pay their fair whack.
I might just crisscross from your article, but I want to go to a point where you said the T20 World Cup qualifier has a ranking system that is open to manipulation and abuse. That is your statement. Now, that is quite a statement, bearing in fact that it may be seen as somewhat incendiary. I know Leon has a question for you in that area, and I wonder if I might turn it over to Leon for his question.
No, Rod, good evening to you once again. And
good evening.
My question to you, though, is couldn't the limited over cricket be existing with test match cricket? Couldn't they coexist and still?
Yes, of course.
The IC
yes, of course. And the international system could coexist with the franchise system. I don't deny that. I'm not calling for the abolition of the franchise system. And let me just say, I'm not the only person who is saying that the ranking system is open to manipulation. And I think that is a point which has been made about the ranking system almost since it was first introduced. It becomes a particularly acute problem, though, when the ranking system is allowed to replace a qualification system.
Yes.
If you have fewer qualifying tournaments and more qualification for global events based on rankings, then you really do have an obligation to ensure that the ranking system has integrity. And I am indeed challenging, and I'm, as I say, not the only one who is challenging, whether the ranking system does have integrity, because I think it can. By the way in which you choose your opponents, you can ensure that you derive maximum benefit from who you play. And I think it's clear that, and sometimes just the sheer randomness of which games get played mean that teams that you wouldn't normally think of as being the best in their region wind up qualifying for a global or a more important regional event. There have been recent examples of that in the past 2 or 3 years, partly because of COVID, but not entirely because of COVID. Coming back to your question, though, Leon, can't they coexist? Yes, they can. And there is obviously a demand for Test cricket, at least in some countries, and particularly against certain opponents. And that's been true since the beginning, that some opponents were more attractive than others. I've just been looking at some figures from 1937 about the profitability of touring matches against Australia in England, and how they were in the 1930s 2 or 3 times as valuable as matches against the South Africans, and 4 times as valuable as matches against the Indians at that time. So these things change over time. But no, I do think that all formats can coexist, and they all have a role to play. The problem I was identifying in that article back in July was that as the IPL program expands with more teams and a longer tournament, and as other tournaments are developed, for example, the new one in South Africa with a lot of Indian money behind it, as the number of weeks in the year demanded by franchise cricket expand, the number of weeks in the year available for traditional international cricket necessarily contract, unless you say, okay, international cricket will have other players than the franchises, which is a possibility.
Okay. Does Coach Jatin has a question on that point he wants to raise?
I will not. Rod got a lot of good points, and all I can say, I can add some stuff, because being born in India and raised there. So whenever it comes, this IPL and BCCI, to be honest with you, picture is very clear. Remember the 1983 World Cup?
Yeah.
Indian team had no money. Government do not wanted to put any single dime on this team. No coach, no manager, absolutely no support from ICC or whatsoever other boards we have in this world. Look what they did after that. They are going on the rise, on the rise, and on the rise. I will say it's not about ICC. It's a time to commercialize this sport. We just talked, like Rod says, 1844, the first match in USA and Canada. After that, what happened? Look at the competitive sport. Baseball was invented within a matter of 6 months after that game in Hoboken, New Jersey. And look at the market today in baseball in this country. We cannot catch up with it. Because I can tell you where the problem is. Even your second point, when you say commercialize, means the country develops the player and they play in franchise cricket. I'm 100% agree with you, but look at the soccer, which is, we call it football. Every country produce that stars. They play in Olympic and FIFA World Cup for their country, which is produced by them over the years. And they, all of them making big chunk in a European league or German league or Spanish league.
Mhm.
It's been there. It's not something new. Over here, the way I look at it, ICC still wants to run all colonial-based chronism system. It will not work. And USA is the test platform 170 years back, 50 years back, and even today, because we have to go with the flow. You cannot sell something that people don't want to buy.
Mhm.
So as we say, you and me both are on the same page. We saying test cricket is dying. But if someone argued, then I will 100% say the quality is diminishes. Since 2007, when we started playing this T20, there's a barely half dozen countries who are really playing a competitive test cricket. And even those countries, look at the performance. You can come, I'm basically an analyst too on performance side. If you look at it, look at the test match result before the 2007 and try to compare the results we have after 2007 to 2022. There are the test matches they're wrapping up in a 3-day, 4-day, I will say half of them. And then we are getting surprises. Is not because of the test style standard they're playing. Some heroics, like England scored 500 in a day. There was a last test match in Australia series. Rishabh Pant came out and started playing like a T20 style inning, and he turned around the match. Now, these are not the quality cricket. These things can happen once upon a time, let's say. It will not be repeated or consistent performance, and that is the hurting the test cricket. More and more we see is these people who has already changed the gear to play T20 and ODI, they are coming in test match and they are employing the other side of the skill. Nobody can put that test skills into this next version. Going on IPL side and development, I will say, we can't just blame on the BCCI or Indian cricket either. Here is my take. Let's say my opinion. I'm not trying to agree or disagree, but here's my take. Whatever the IPL doing it, all other boards are happy. That is why they are sending these players with the NOC, with the big contracts, because each and every board is getting some sort of pie out of this system. And at the same time, the ICC is getting the biggest chunk too. When you say about the business, then yes, I can repeat. This ICC is actually registered business in a small island down here in CARICOM country called a British Virgin Island. The business is registered is in a really tiny island where they don't have even single team playing cricket.
Yep, that's
and
true.
the headquarters in Dubai. And find me a one document where ICC say we own this property.
Yep. No, I think you're
Coming
right.
straight to the point, I think Indian genius people and all these smart business people find out how to keep this game survive and taking to the 21st century where everything need to be quick. And they are generating money. Look at the women IPL. The media rights for 5 years is 941 crores, just a media rights.
Yep.
And this
I
10
don't deny that.
franchise, yeah, in 10 franchise, look at that, 140 plus people wants to own the team. Tell me which other country you have even 4 owner, let's say besides the late Gary Packer, who wants to put money behind cricket?
Very few.
You have
Right.
Certainly very few individuals outside India. And I
So
don't
you
deny
got a lot of good stuff. You got a lot of good stuff, but I will say, moving forward, honestly, to me, get rid of this monopoly, make it competitive, make it privatization. We cannot drum it for this political business. Look at what's happening. ICC cannot handle the volume of cricket, which is growing. Every country has some sort of political or financial issue, and we cannot keep up fighting with those things. And that is what the FIFA, way far from ICC, they reach like 204 association. Next FIFA World Cup in USA will be like one of the largest team sporting event in history, with almost 48 teams are expected to compete.
Mhm.
And ICC is still in that Super 6 to 16 teams. They are not moving more than that. And I'm 100% agree on that one. When you say ranking and qualification, yes, that is a major issue. They have to open up and find a way to promote and support this game so it can increase more participation and engagement.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah.
Thank you,
keeping
Coach.
all these options is basically we need more players, and some of the country can put even 3 teams at same time, and that is what we need to look for the future.
Your insights.
Can I come back on some of that?
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think I agree with Jatin. I certainly agree with Jatin about the ICC. There is no more severe critic of the ICC than I am. And I agree that it certainly started as a colonial operation. It was run by and from England in the interest of England and its allies for the first half century or so, first 60 years of its existence. Part of the problem is that all that has happened since is that now it's being run for the benefit of India and its allies rather than the benefit of England and its allies. It's a mirror image of what existed before 1990. So yeah, we agree about that. I don't agree that there is no market for Test cricket. I've been trying to get tickets for one of the tests in England, one of the Ashes tests in England this summer, and it is impossible. Those games will be sold out. Tests involving India against
And
almost
Pakistan.
anybody.
Yep.
Have big audiences. So it's not true. It is not true that there is no market for Test cricket. It can be much more effectively marketed, and there would be
Limited.
a much bigger market
Limited
for
market,
it
yeah.
if it were properly competitive. I mean, I think one of the worst decisions that the ICC has made in the past 12 months is the decision to abolish the Super League. Because they keep saying cricket must have context, and they create a competition, a 50-over competition, where every match has context. They then fail to promote it and market it, so that most journalists in the world do not understand that the ODIs their teams are playing are part of the Super League. The ignorance has been astonishing. And then before the first round of it has been completed, the first edition of it has been completed, they decide to abolish it because certain countries, which shall be nameless, but which for the sake of argument we shall call India, say, no, we don't want to play any in the Super League. We want bilateral matches again, which is absolute nonsense. So does the ICC have a lot to learn from FIFA and from other global organizations? Absolutely. Part of that, indeed, has to do with the way in which countries are recompensed for the quality of the players they produce. The funding system of FIFA, which is also an organization which is far from perfect, but nevertheless, the funding arrangements within FIFA are much fairer and much more equitable than the funding arrangements in cricket. So yes, I share many of your concerns. I accept that corporatism is a growing feature of all international sport, not just in cricket. and that it's something which has to be accepted, but not necessarily 100% on its own terms. And I think if there are competing interests, for example, involving the national boards, who do have interests which are different from those of the IPL and the BCCI, then those interests have to be adequately argued and fought for. And I don't think that they are at the present time. And I think you could invent a system which was much fairer to everybody, which ensured that national boards had enough money to do what they need to do to ensure the continuation of the production of good cricketers. I don't think we have that yet. Maybe we will wind up with a system where international cricket has different players from those who play in the franchises, in the same way that many countries now have white ball teams and red ball teams. Maybe that's a direction in which cricket could and should develop. But it's certainly a discussion we ought to be having, and I'm glad that we're having this discussion as part of that.
Yeah, you mentioned, the problems you're having, perhaps foreseeing with getting tickets for the Test match. I know that Test cricket and ODI formats are popular in Australia, England, New Zealand, and India. Many people have suggested that Test cricket is actually dying. Do you believe that the two formats, Test and ODI, will eventually become obsolete? If so, what are the driving factors?
No, I don't believe that. I sometimes say that watching a Test match is like reading a 19th century Russian novel. And there are lots of people who like reading 19th century Russian novels. Nobody argues that 19th century Russian novels should be removed from libraries, or publishers should no longer publish them because they're not economic. If a Test match is a 19th century Russian novel, an ODI is like a short story. It's got a single plot, and a T20 match is like a cartoon. I like cartoons. I watch Tom and Jerry, and I watch Wile E. Coyote with great pleasure, but I don't watch them when I feel like reading Tolstoy. And if you sit, there is, in my view, okay, I know I'm old-fashioned and so on, but there is no greater pleasure, in my view, than sitting down on the first morning of a Test match, whether it's at the match or on television, and watching the story unfold with its chapters, with its subplots, with its shifts and changes, all that complexity, and the balance between batting and bowling. Because one of the things that I think is fundamental to the differences between the formats is that the shorter the format, the more the game is weighted towards the batters. Now, it's true that bowlers have been pretty skillful in developing ways of dealing with that. And you now have bowlers who are much more varied in the kinds of deliveries they can bowl, particularly in power play overs or in the final overs at the death. I don't say that the shorter formats haven't transformed cricket. You watch the fielding in Test cricket, and you see that Test players now do things in the field which they wouldn't have dreamt of doing when I was young, in terms of catches over the boundary and throwing the ball back, in terms of teamwork in the field, all those things. Yeah, I think not only can the forms coexist, I think they're interdependent. I think Test cricket needs the shorter formats, but I also think the shorter formats need Test cricket. They need batters who have the fundamental skills that can only be developed over 2 or 3 sessions, where you're batting for a long time, and you need to develop the stamina, but also the range of shots and the combination of attacking and defending shots, which you learn in the longer format. And they then apply them. There have been very few cricketers, Warner is a notable exception, but there have been very few cricketers who have been stars in the short format before they developed their skills in the longer format. Warner is an extraordinary example, but most cricketers in the major cricket playing countries have learnt the game in 2-day cricket or 3-day cricket or 4-day cricket in England, and then apply those skills in the shorter formats as their careers develop. So yeah, I think they can, as I say, I think not only can they coexist, I think they all need each other. But they also need an economic basis for all to flourish. And we do not have that at the moment. And I think there is a danger that we will have it less and less as the corporate bosses acquire more and more power.
You've indicated, I'm sorry, I heard somebody
I just wanted to just butt in here a little bit.
Yes.
And Rod, do you think that the shorter format is what is killing the West Indies cricket? For instance, the better players are being recruited, and they have signed a 50-year contract with CPL, which doesn't permit them to play any format in the Caribbean, so that they have no means to reproduce in a similar tournament. And the players that are, the youngsters that are included in the teams are very limited, maybe 2 or 3 max. So what's your take on that?
I'm by no means an expert on West Indies cricket, but I think that's a really, really interesting point. I've just watched the West Indies in Australia being absolutely taken apart in a 3-day series. And I also watched the 50-over side in the Netherlands, where they were distinctly stronger than the Dutch, but still disappointing by the standards that West Indies cricket set for itself over a very long period of time. Okay, it's very hard, would be very hard for anybody to live up to the achievements of Marshall and Richards and Ambrose and those guys who were a stunningly good side, as good as any side there has ever been in cricket. But yeah, I think clearly there are structural problems and have been structural problems in West Indies cricket for a long time. They have to do with governance. They have to do with to some extent with geography, I think, because logistically getting around the West Indies is far from easy. So I think there are other factors as well. I think the pull of the United States, the pull of basketball, the pull of baseball, all those things are undoubtedly contributing as well. Poverty undoubtedly contributes. But at the same time, I mean, the point you make about the exclusiveness of the CPL and the effect that is bound to have on player development really makes my point for me. If you cut off the natural flow of talent from grassroots cricket through to the highest forms of international cricket, then there is only one possible outcome, and that is that you wind up down the bottom of the pile. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that, and I regret it. I think something has to be done about it, and I think it is a perfect case of what I am complaining about and what I'm drawing attention to. And to be honest, I don't know what the answer is.
Rod,
but we have to find one, or cricket in the West Indies will die.
You indicated that July, October, and November are the 3 months identified as being unaffected by domestic franchise competition. Why do you think that other formats of cricket cannot successfully grow in those 3 months? In other words, does Test cricket require more than 3 months to blossom? Does the ODI, require more than that because of the franchise? Because when we speak of franchise cricket, we're primarily speaking of the T20s.
Yeah, of course we are. Yeah.
So
yeah.
why can ODIs and tests not succeed in those 3 months?
There have been
Mostly
complaints
weather.
about. There have been complaints about. There's weather. Let's talk about that as well.
100% weather.
Yeah, well, not
Well,
100%, but that's it's a
CPL around
factor.
about that time, though.
There have been complaints about the pressure on international players of the amount of international cricket since the 1930s, when the number of test countries expanded from 3 to 6. And those I've been looking at some of the figures on the number of international matches played over the years, and there is a huge expansion in the amount of 5-day, 1-day, and T20 cricket played through the 70s, 80s, 90s into the current century. So there is just a lot of cricket, and whereas in football you can say, okay, we'll have an international window of 10 days, and sides will come together and they'll play 2 matches. A test match takes 5 days. Well, in principle, a test match takes 5 days. They don't always do so, but in principle, they take 5 days. You have to allocate 5 days for a test match. There is a lot of opposition, understandably, to back-to-back test matches. Players need downtime between matches. So you cannot play a test series over a fortnight. It takes at least a month to play a test series. If you also want to fit in, unless you're going to have a 2-test series or one-off tests, and I think most people take the view that one-off tests are not a great idea, that 2-match series are less than ideal, and that really 3 tests kind of the minimum that you need for a decent series of test cricket. If you're going to play ODIs and T20s as well, then you're talking about a longer period than that. And if you have franchise players who are playing all around the world for the other 9 months of the year, it's extremely unlikely that they're going to be keen then to fill up an additional month with an international call-up. So I just think it would be unrealistic to say, okay, let's have international cricket 3 months of the year, and the rest of the time it'll be franchise cricket. I think it is possible to imagine a system where, a bit in the same way that at present, when the BBL is on, the Big Bash League in Australia, national team players are unavailable for their BBL teams when the national team is playing. We've just seen this week the national team players come back into the BBL having finished their international commitments. Cricket Australia has got that right. Not a phrase I use very often. Cricket Australia has got that right. They've said, no, the national team comes first, and the BBL, because we continue to control the BBL, we've not let private franchises into the BBL. We have not welcomed Indian money into the BBL. We are not going to sell off, as South Africa has done, the BBL franchises. They will remain in the hands of Cricket Australia. So there's a sense in which they're not really franchises in the IPL sense at all. They're not clubs either. They are separate team operations. They operate a bit more like international teams in that sense, with their own coaching staffs and so on. But it is possible then, in a system like that, for international cricket and franchise cricket to coexist. But you have to have the will to do it. And you have to take the view that it's the interest of cricket as a sport which is the most important thing. And that's my biggest, most fundamental criticism of the ICC, and it's also Lord Wolfe's most important criticism of the ICC, that ultimately the ICC is not about the good of cricket. It's about the good of a small number of its members, and specifically India, Australia, and England. I mean, England and Australia, who ran cricket until the Indians took over, are still running cricket, but they're now doing it in partnership with India. So in that sense, nothing has changed, except that the post-colonial world has now kicked in. And do I, as an Australian, regret the existence of the post-colonial world? Not at all. I think the imperial powers had it coming, but I still want the system to work for the benefit of the game I love, and not for the benefit of a few very rich people, wherever they are. In that, I'm with CLR James.
Do you see, is it likely to ever become possible to take the year and divide it into quotients, 2 months or 3 months, whatever it may be, and set aside, say, 1/4 or 1/3 for ODI, 1/3 for T20s, and 1/3 for Test? Would that not be more practical in terms of how it's done?
It's an interesting idea. I don't think it would work if you divided the year up by format. I think if you divided the year up by in a fair way between commercial cricket, if you like, and international cricket and its domestic base, and you did it in a way which was fairly funded as well, then I think, yes, it is imaginable. That's one of the things I tried to say in the article. I think you can imagine a system which is fair to everybody, provided everybody makes reasonable demands. I think some of the demands which are being made at the moment are unreasonable. You say that's the way corporations are. I say, yes, that is the way corporations are, but that's why I am against unbridled capitalism anyway. I mean, this is not only an argument about cricket. This is an argument about the world, which we're having as Davos is meeting. It's an argument about whether you want the world to be a decent place in which people's interests are fairly managed, or whether you want it to be a jungle in which the biggest lion always wins, or the biggest tiger always wins. And I don't want a world in which the biggest tiger always wins. And I think a lot of other people don't either. So I'm arguing for equity. Ultimately, I'm arguing for decency. And I realize that's an unfashionable thing to do. But I'm on the, yes, I make no apology for the fact that I'm on that side of the argument, as indeed was CLR James. So, yeah, I mean, I think what we need is a kind of parliament to sit down, a round table where people of goodwill sit down with the people who are not of goodwill and say, look, we cannot go on like this. We hear you, we recognize your greed, we understand your greed, but we are not going to go along with your greed to an unlimited extent. We have to find a way not only for the formats to coexist, we also have to find a way for the interests to coexist. And we don't at present have that. That's really what I'm ultimately arguing for. And I realize it's a big ask.
And wait,
Liam?
Wait, Rod. Isn't the ICC should play a pivotal role in effecting some of the things that you're saying?
if only the ICC could and would. But as Jatin said,
the
the ICC was set up for another purpose. I've been looking recently at the creation of the ICC, and the ICC was about binding together 3 white imperial nations. That's what the ICC was set up to do. And it continued to do that with the help of New Zealand over the dead bodies of, almost in some cases literally, of India and the West Indies, and ultimately Pakistan, and then Sri Lanka, for as long as it could, until the shift in the world economy and the growth of tiger economies like the Indian one, and the Indian discovery that there was massive money in television coverage of cricket. That was the turning point. And ultimately it was Packer, I suppose, who taught that lesson. But yes, the ICC should be the key player in all of this. The ICC, as we currently have it, is not going to be. Would the ICC that Lord Wolfe wanted have been in a position to do so? Yes, maybe. But we all know what happened to Lord Wolfe's report. So, and, you know, if only, and I'm conscious that I am on slightly thin ice here, but if only countries like the United States were able to play a more constructive role. But those of us outside watch what goes on in American cricket with despair, with absolute despair. And it's, as I understand it, it's happening again in American cricket. Again, I've just been reading about the USA Cricket Association and its troubles in the early 2000s. And it makes you want to tear your hair out that people can be so stupid and so greedy and so egotistical and power mad that they are prepared to make the game suffer to get their own way. It's just insane. But that's a subject for a different program, I suspect.
Yep.
Indeed. And over to Coach.
Yeah. No, not much comment. Rod is like a very similar concept I have, because when you read through and what all this, it makes sense that, I mean, it's visible. If ICC don't want to bend down or wants to do something for the goods, don't expect the people who are against them can build bridge and come down to you. I mean, USA is probably a country to talk about next 3 years or maybe 5 years when they are eyeing for the Los Angeles Olympic. We have a very long way to go, because this is the heaven of almost all sport, billions of dollars generated in sports industry in this country. And we are competing against that. The one thing, I'm in US for 39 years, being soccer coach, referee, administrator for 28 years. And all I can see when I compare, I call it the disparities between cricket and soccer. I can say cricket is horrible and sucks.
Yep.
In any business, see, the US is all about business-oriented market, where the customer is the god. And I'm coming from business side too. We believe if you are not ready to listen, critique, concern, and complain, you're done with the business. And that is what ICC is ignoring. And the troops they are sending here from out of the world, with whatever the qualifications they have, whatever the credentials they have, they cannot fix this game in this country. It's better to rely on the people who have spent 3 decades or more being involved in the game. They are the one knows the problem. And they're trying to keep them on the sidelines or keep them away and looking for the new people who are trying to understand the game, or coming the foreigner. First is trying to learn the game for a year or 2 on salary, and they'll come out some solution, and then you're going to fail. Then you bring another administrator and he's starting all over. It's not going to work. They're trying
No.
for what? Last 3 decades now.
I have a question. Well, two things.
Go ahead.
One of the games I sometimes play with myself is what would have happened if in 1909 England, Australia, and South Africa had decided to invite the United States to join
And
the
they declined
ICC.
the membership.
If America had become a member in 1909 with test status, and God knows the Philadelphians were good enough.
Yeah.
They were certainly as good as South Africa at that time. What would have happened to world cricket? What would have happened to the ICC? It's a tragedy that did not happen. That's one thing. The other thing is, I may have mentioned this last time I was on, but have any of you read a novel by Joseph O'Neill called Netherland?
I recall you did mention that. No, I
You
have
mentioned, but never grabbed the copy. I'll run down library
Read
and
it.
see if I can find one.
Read it.
Joseph
Joseph O'Neill is of Irish origin, lives in New York, teaches journalism in New York, has written several novels. Netherland is about cricket in America. It's about cricket in New York. It's a murder mystery at one level, and it's a really good book. The central character is a Dutch banker just after 9/11, because Joseph O'Neill learned his cricket in the Netherlands, which is why the book is called Netherland. And the hero of the book is a West Indian living in New York, who has the dream of building an international standard cricket stadium in New York. And I think it's a great novel. I think it's a really, really good novel. And it's a novel which, from my outsider's point of view, captures something of the nature of American cricket, for good and bad. So I can't recommend it strongly enough to you and to your listeners. Joseph O'Neill, Netherland, without an S. Great cricket book, I think. One of several great cricket novels. And yeah, I mean, I think it has been such a shame that essentially international cricket vacated the space that America inhabits and left it to baseball and other sports. Now, I know baseball was already a strong competitor by 1909, but even so, had cricket been able to offer test cricket to an American public through the 1920s, through the 1930s, if Bradman and his side came to America, if they'd been playing an American side on equal terms, they would have won very easily. But still, it would have been, by that time, I think they would have been much stronger. But it would still have been a different ball game, and we got the imperialists got that wrong, as they have got so much wrong over the years.
And I can add on the history side, because I talked to a lot of baseball senior coaches and the soccer coaches in some sort of real American part of the country, because cricket is still located around the coastal states.
Yep.
Only wherever the immigrants are. And their sentiment is completely different when I talk to cricket. Some of them are, even they are in a bad mood when we say cricket, but they still tell me the truth. And the truth is, USA was the first ever country to get the independence from British.
Yep.
And at that point, they decided anything belonged to British, we're not going to take it.
Yeah.
And because of that, this all started, and by the civil revolution, civilization, we call it, where the country has to work. Northern part of the country are the laborers in the factories, and the southern part of the US was like a slaves on the farm. They cannot afford this game, 5-day-long picnic, I call it. That is what the Americans say, because they have to work each and every day to feed and bring bread and butter for the family.
Yeah.
And because of that, the baseball was invented to play at night or under lights, right? And then you got the story here. It's a really critical. The most important time is the 1906 and 1909. I can send you article from my Indianapolis. I believe there is a history in Almanac. They penalized $500 in 1906 if you play cricket over the weekend.
Ha. Yeah, okay.
Because if
Yeah.
you play Saturday and Sunday cricket, and let's say you drink and enjoy the party, and if you make a call on Monday like I'm sick, your boss don't like it.
Yeah.
So they force the penalty. And then ICC rubbed the salt on the wound in 1909 when they declined the membership of the cricket.
USA?
And don't forget, even in 1965, when they accepted the USA Cricket Association, it was not by the Americans. Never. All the people, majority they had are like a Caribbean wanted to get it. And even today, when I go Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, those states, I know the real truth. They still say today, what is this cricket? It's run by foreigners, played by the foreigners. All the foreigners are involved. What's in for us?
Yeah.
And that is the big question.
And the other factor is class.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to 1900 and you look at the Philadelphians,
yeah,
they are members of exclusive clubs in Philadelphia.
That's it.
The same is true, I think, in New York and Boston and other places. As you say, it's a sport in the Northeast at that time, and baseball quickly becomes a working man's sport. It becomes a working class sport. Still racially divided until after the Second World War. I mean, it would be really, somebody should write a novel about a fictional West Indies test tour of America.
I remember
in 1934, 1935. Imagine that America has got test status, and in 1934, 1935, a predominantly black West Indies cricket team comes to America,
Long Island. I know that,
and plays against an American test team, and probably wins the series 4-0. And imagine what that might have been like. As I say, fiction, but fiction can sometimes hold a mirror up to the real world. That's what good fiction does, and say, yeah, okay, there was another way to go, and we didn't take it.
No, not
Robert
only
Frost, the road not taken, and we should have taken it.
Yeah, the tough choice is, I have my two kids grown up, 30 plus now. They are soccer players all their life. Daughter was like gymnastic and former Rio All-Star. And we always have this chat. And one point, my kid teach me the good lesson. They asked me, I was like 46 age. They asked me, how many years you spent in India? I said, 26 since I born. Then I come to this country, 20 more years. And then why talking cricket? Because I told them that I born with the cricket, I played in a street cricket, and I still love cricket, and I want to continue cricket in US. So my son says, are you done? Then he told me the simple fact. You came from foreign country. You like that game. You don't want to quit. And you telling American people who born and raised here with the baseball and football, and you asking them to change their sport. Why don't you change your sport and become a soccer coach? And I accepted. So what is the situation right now here with these about less than 2% of the population belong to cricket? These are all foreigners coming from the cricket playing nations, and they are trying to convince 98% like this is your sport and you're supposed to play. So this whole I will say business, it looks like you are trying to sell ice to Eskimos. And they're fighting each other.
Point.
In the winter.
I understand the point. I just don't think it has to be like that.
No.
You look at the players of Croatian, whatever extent, descent, who, when they migrate, take up cricket. You look at the way in which cricket has developed among the indigenous population in countries like Rwanda, where it's largely Rwandans who play. A country which had no connection with the British Commonwealth until because it was a Belgian colony, God help it, until it decided to join the Commonwealth. Look at Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's another one.
I was looking the other day at the Asian Cricket Council tournaments from the 1990s, early 2000s. Iran played in those tournaments.
Yep.
With a team which was 100% Iranian.
Yep.
Not like the countries in Europe and the Middle East, where all the players come from the subcontinent or from Australia or New Zealand or South Africa. No, actually, the Chinese team, admittedly, it wasn't very good, but the Chinese team, they were all Chinese. They are all Chinese. So it can be done. It can be done.
It will
I
be.
don't say it's easy.
It will be.
There are American-born American cricketers.
That is right.
Mostly of Caribbean origin or subcontinental origin. Not many of them white Americans who go back to the founding fathers, but it's possible if you have the right strategies. I just don't think we have the right strategies.
And that is the point. Within 10 years, I would say, within 10 years, we will have maybe 1,000+ good, talented, potential cricket players in this country who born in these families.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the seriousness need to be, think about it from here. How are we going to train them and how are we going to nurture them so they can become international competitive players?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
at the risk of sounding like the ICC, you need good governance as well.
Yep, that's it.
And one of the big things about American cricket is that the governance has been, with all due respect, terrible. So
I can tell you what happened. Like, say, minor league they put in place 3 years now. But if you look at the format, I can tell you, the success of the minor league is not because of the governance, administration, or the people running minor league. I will give 100% credit to the owners who are putting money into and keep doing it. And in that sense, I will say the thing I know. If they follow exactly like the NFL, NBA, or other games in this country, true ownership or true partnership, cricket can fly.
Yeah.
But even today, these people are hogging. Like these board members are fighting without money or budget, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows why they are fighting, for what power, what's in there. But there is a personal interest, right?
Yeah.
And over here, we all learn this thing. The world is going in different direction. Corporate franchisee cricket is growing. People are out there to put the money. Why don't we just welcome and utilize those resources and build on, let's say, minor league and get some money out of it and do your national development under the board?
Yeah, I think it's a model which can be made to work, and it can be made to work in the interest of everybody.
Yeah,
but you have to have the will to make it work. And yeah, sorry, go on.
No, I was about to say we've monopolized a great deal of your time. I don't know how much more of your time you wish to give to us, but
I do need to think about going, and this is becoming a very long program.
Yes,
so, it is fine. Very interesting topic.
Enjoy hearing you.
And we can schedule some point in future too, because we don't want to drag too much on.
Let's come back.
Let's come back. One quick question: are you looking forward to the Indian or the Australian tour of India? Can't wait to see Travis Head against the Indian bowlers.
Yes, of course. I think it could be a great series between two very good sides, and it will be really interesting. I mean, Australia have picked a couple of new young spinners as well.
Yes.
So that will be
Gil is
interesting.
batting out of this world for a youngster.
India, Australia are always going to be great series, I think. The one here was a terrific series.
Yeah.
Hard fought all the way, and I think the Ashes series in England is going to be great as well. So I think we're in for what 8 months of really good cricket. I won't bother to watch the IPL. I'll be too busy watching the tests.
Yep.
There's room for all. There's a place up there for
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
games like
Absolutely.
these.
Yeah.
So I would dearly like to take this time and opportunity to say thank you so much for, giving us up your valuable time and insights into the world of cricket. I know there's still a lot to go, and we'll continue to follow you. And we know that we'll be asking you back many more times, because
Happy to come back.
Your insights are always well appreciated, and you bring to us a level of, shall we say, investigation that and a way of looking at things that maybe not all of us are able to see at first glance. So thank you once again for spending time with us, and we look forward to the next time when you are able to come and give us some more of your genius. Thank you, Rob.
It's a pleasure, Dennis. Until next time.
Until next time.
Thank you, Rod, and have a nice day in Australia. I know
Thank
we
you.
are winding down in evening now.
It was raining earlier. Bye, guys.
No, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Good night to all. Thank you.
Thank you.